Austria. And each of the speakers has got about 15 to 20 minutes, but better 15 than 20, and you are welcome.
Thank you very much, Rozalia. I'm going to present some ideas about the research on teacher education or issues related to teaching and teachers that in our doctoral program at University of Lisbon, specifically in the field of mathematics education. And my colleague Luís Tinoca will address other types of research in the field of teacher education. So we sort of take these two strands, the more didactics-oriented part and the more general part that was mentioned a while ago. Sort of trying to organize and classify studies, I think it is one way of looking at the methodology of looking at studies is on the topics, the studies that have been done in teacher education include a lot of issues related to knowledge and practice and teacher education and teacher professional development. But also another way is looking at methodology. And in the methodology, I would like to sort of differentiate between four kinds. One that I would say is more traditional could be called the data extraction agreement, in which the researcher sort of creates an agreement with some teachers or some school to conduct a sort of a naturalistic study. Then we have something that represents a closer situation, the cooperation agreement, for example, in teaching experiments. Then even a stronger involvement of participants would be collaborative studies. And then another kind, distinct from the former three, would be petitioner research, in which the research is conducted within the practice of the researcher. So the data extraction agreements, I would say they have lots of strong points, simpler to define the object of study for the researcher, and to maintain a critical stance and a neutral stance versus this object. Of course, this study is limited to what exists in the natural setting. It does not sort of create many possibilities to see other phenomena. It is useful for some purposes to document in detail existing problems or existing strengths, existing phenomena that are already known in one way or another. Then the cooperation agreements, for example, teaching experiments with design research. The researcher has a strong control over the situation in planning and in carrying out the research, but it is possible to get more involvement from the participants. At least it may depend on the agreement, but still the power is very much under control of the research, is on the researcher. This weakens on the collaborative studies, in which the group creates a dynamic and the researcher so as to deal with this sort of imprevisibility of things. So it creates situations that can be very interesting and very creative, because participants, if the collaborative work is really authentic and there is something that is interesting to everybody, this is a very empowering situation. And so we can see new things happening, transformations occurring in the setting and in the practice. But of course, there's a lot of loss of control from the researcher that creates a problem. And so that's the feature of this. And in petitioner research, what we have is, again, a high control of the researcher on the situation, but the blinding effect, because the researcher is too close to the context and so has some trouble in making judgments that are really critical, and very often the researcher is very supportive of what is happening, very positive, in other cases very negative. And so this blinding effect is a big problem in this kind of study. And another kind of problem is the ethical issues of carrying two roles at the same time. The role of the participant, the teacher or the teacher educator, and the role of the researcher. They have conflicting demands, and there are ethical issues that have to be dealt with that are very complex. So all four kinds have some strengths, some weaknesses, and I will speak of two kinds, the collaborative studies and petitioner research, these last two, that I find the most complicated, the most that involve stronger problems for the researcher, but also that I see as having stronger potential to create new knowledge, new interesting knowledge about the problems that are being researched. This is the studies that have been done under this group of collaborative studies. So the first one in the field of mathematics education at University of Lisbon. That's what I'm talking about. First one in 2002, and the very last one last year, 2012. And I am going to concentrate more on this work of Ana Boavida, which was one of the first. And this, I find a very interesting study and in some sort of paradigm of this kind of work. The aim was to study argumentation in the mathematics classroom. So why to create a collaborative group to study this? Because if we go into a classroom and look for instances of argumentation, we can sit the whole classroom and see no argumentation taking place, at least explicit argumentation. Or we can see only argumentation being done by the teacher. When we are speaking of mathematical argumentation in the classroom, we are interested that the students are active participants in the argumentation. Hopefully the students are creating arguments and are discussing the arguments with each other. This does not happen naturally in most mathematics classrooms. So there is the need to create this group that discusses this and sees how to create classrooms in which this phenomena occurs and then study it. But of course it is necessary to find teachers interested in this process. So it is necessary some conditions to make this possible. The theoretical framework for this is mostly about mathematical argumentation in the classroom. There is literature on this, and also in this study there was an extended discussion about collaboration and the conditions for the development of collaborative studies. So, as Ana Boavida states in her PhD thesis, this is in an interpretive collaborative paradigm. I think she created this world. There is the interpretive paradigm that we know very well. There is a collaborative version. But this was to mean that really the collaboration was something very important on this research. And the data for these, there was classroom observations and recording of the classrooms, but that was not what was analyzed in the thesis. That was used then to be viewed in the group meetings of the collaborating of the participants. So that was part of the process. And then the data was the reflections and the discussions that from the group on what happened in the classroom. And it could be seen a lot of things about argumentation. I think this study was very fruitful about what was intended as the object of the study. That was a lot of learning coming out about what makes possible, what makes fruitful argumentation. I'm not going to go in that aspects. I will focus on the problematic aspects and the strengths of this research. First problematic aspect, it took the researcher a lot of work to support the building of a common way of work in the group. It was not just get started and it started from 1 week to the next. So the work was planned to take place during 1 year, and it took almost 2 years. So there was this difficulty in terms of the planning and in terms of really getting and being very careful about building this collaborative group. In terms of time, giving time and allowing time for the participants to really integrate and create identity in the group, and also creating these, the working processes. Then there was another complication that teachers are very busy, and finding ways, finding time for meeting and also to doing the homework between meetings is not just having classes observed and then going to meetings. It was necessary to read things, sometimes to write reflections, etc. And so this became very demanding on the participants. And of course, you can imagine that this generated a huge amount of data. Only the transcripts of the working sessions that were, I think, about 40 or something like that. The strengths of the study, it provided a very comprehensive view about the kind of classroom where argumentation takes place in the Portuguese setting. There were already things, descriptions of this kind in the classroom in the literature in other countries, not in the Portuguese case. So this, in our setting, was really very important. The theoretical analysis regarding collaboration and the way the collaborative group developed. The Petitioner research has a lesser number of theses, 2008, and then 2011 and 2013. In fact, two of these, the authors are represented here in this seminar, so they may want to present their own view. And the last one in this year, it was done by Neuza Branco, that I will talk about a little more in detail. So this was done in the university setting, initial teacher education, working with pre-service teachers for the elementary school, focusing on algebra. It was a course on algebra, with several ideas regarding how teachers may develop this knowledge. For those that are not so familiar with mathematics, algebra in elementary school is a revolutionary idea, because what is assumed is that at elementary school is number and geometry, and that's it. Perhaps a little bit of statistics. Algebra, no way. Algebra is for secondary school. So now this idea of having some work on algebra in elementary school, that was sort of a draft for this study, and it followed design research methodology with the teaching experiment design. So it was a full course with 20 prospective teachers participating in the study. And of course, this also provided a lot of knowledge about this kind of process and what is possible to do with these participants. I will address the problematic aspects and the strengths of the research. One problem was that within the scope of the PhD, in terms of design research, it was not possible to have several cycles. Only one cycle was possible. There was some constraints because of the program, some things that perhaps could be done in other situations, like having the pre-service students going to the schools and interviewing real students with some tasks to know what they could do. They could not do it with real students. They had to see video clips and transcripts from classrooms, but there were plenty of practical activities of different sorts. It was very much this idea of connecting theory and practice and connecting mathematics content and mathematics pedagogy as well as underlying ideas for this study. The strengths, it showed as it was possible to pay attention to the ethical issues, making sure that really there were no problems for the participants, that there was no special pressure on them. It draws on an innovative issue in teacher education. the design of this study included many elements of data collection process, so it was possible, and it was possible to craft them in a way that the teacher, when the teacher was teaching, could concentrate really on the teaching, because the students then we have to write and have portfolios, and there was video recording of the classes. So the data collection was done outside and without conflict with the activities of the teaching. And the study showed that the kind of exploratory approach that is advocated in curriculum documents for mathematics students in elementary school, we can follow a similar approach in teacher education with very good learning results in terms of new prospective teachers. So combining these two elements of attention to content and pedagogy. So to conclude, these two examples, I find them much more complex and dangerous than the data extraction agreements and even the design research with a team that is not the researcher conducting the study. So they are problematic, but really they are quite interesting to study some kind of phenomena, especially these phenomena that are not readily available in the natural settings. And the collaborative studies, if we need to combine the expertise of a researcher with other expertises, for example, of the teacher, is also very important. But of course, there's some limitations that we should be aware and some problems. And the petitioner research, again, a very strong point that I still did not mention, that is unique to this kind of study. We complain very often that what is learned in research does not transfer to practice, because it keeps on the articles. They used to be on the shelves, now they are on the digital library, somewhere in the cloud, and they do not transfer to practice. If it is practitioner research, it may translate to the practice of the researcher and perhaps to the practice of the people that are very close because they are in contact. So this is a very strong point of the practitioner research. And so the metaphor of the oil, that is the oil liquid that is going and spreading, is very important. And so it may, in the case of these two teachers, and especially in the case of the practitioner research, this was a phenomenon that was happening. So I find this as a very useful research designs that perhaps we can look with very attention, but to study these processes of transformation in education. Thank you.
Thank you.